At the United Nations on Monday, President Obama is expected to announce that the U.S. will allow 110,000 refugees into the country in 2017. That's a 29% increase from this year.
As of February, the United Nations has identified 13.5 million Syrians requiring humanitarian assistance. Nearly 5 million of those are actually refugees. Two filmmakers are trying to shine a light on the crisis and spent 1 month living in a Syrian refugee camp. The documentary Salam Neighbor features a story of a young boy, Raouf, and his fear of going to school after leaving Syria.
أول سنة كان هو يرغب للمدرسة يروح الصبح يفيق لحاله يلبس وبده يروح على المدرسة لو قبل الوقت. لما كنا بسوريا صار قصف اجت قذيفة بالمدرسة. ما كانوا محددين هذا خلص المهم يعاقبوا البلد بسبة هذول هيك اللي صار يضربوا تيجي بالبيوت اجت بالبيوت واجت بالمدارس واجت بالشوارع ما استسمح حدا يعني. فرؤوف ثاني يوم عم يقول لي يابا لا تقول لي روح المدرسة هاي اجت القذائف فيها لا تقول لي روح المدرسة خلص فجروها للمدرسة. صارت عنده عقدة من المدارس يعني بسبب هالشيء يعني هيك. فتحت مواجه انت وياه يعني كان هم اولادي والله.
Raouf's father there saying his son is traumatized. You're seeing Chris Temple and Ingrasci, the documentary filmmakers behind this, who went to Jordan to tell the story of these Syrian refugees. Thank you guys for coming in, for sharing that with us. Speak to us about the level of depression that must exist among so many. I mean, you were there for a month, but these folks can't leave.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. And, you know, Raouf is a perfect example. When we first arrived in this camp, he was our guide. He was this fun, loving kid, but underneath the surface, you know, he had this trauma. And so many of the people, everyone we were there, everyone in this camp had gone through unimaginable, truly unimaginable things. And Raouf represents actually an entire generation of children who are struggling with going back to school, restarting their lives.
When you consider that, you know, on average, refugees are displaced for 17 years, you know, you look at how important actually these psychosocial issues become, because how do you overcome, you know, the severe trauma like your school being bombed if you are stuck inside this camp with limited access to schooling, limited access to play, or to ways that all of us would typically overcome an issue like that.
And it's always the children in war zones that just pull at your heartstring. I think they face the worst obstacles in many ways because their future is just shattered. Have you spoken to Raouf recently, and how is he doing?
Yeah, so amazingly, I mean, the Syrian population is so well connected. It's really the first population that are smartphone users that are refugees, and so we speak frequently with Raouf on WhatsApp and many of our other friends in the camp. The best news is that he's actually back in school right now after his third birthday in the camp and third year of trying to get back into the swing of things and into a routine. And so we've just been, it's kind of been amazing getting to see his progress.
And we just had a screening actually in Amman, Jordan a couple months ago, and Raouf was the one that got up afterwards and spoke with Ismail, some of the other characters of the film, and it was so powerful to hear just his own, own journey and his own words after, talking and giving his perspective.
I'm interested to know what those who are still inside this refugee camp think of the documentary. I know you guys stay in contact with them, sharing the fact that you're screening it. You'll be at the UN next week as part of this really effort to put more attention on what many Americans don't pay much attention to. What do they say to you, and what do they think about the presidential election? Because refugees as just a label is something both candidates have been talking about.
So one thing we did that actually we really enjoyed was getting to go back to the camp and show Raouf and Ismail and everybody who's in the film before we released it on Netflix and showed it to anybody else. And so it was honestly the most nerve-wracking screening we've ever had, sitting just on a laptop inside Raouf's family's tent. But they really enjoyed the film, and I think they were just thankful that they had an opportunity to share their voice, share their perspective, and get that voice out into the world, where a lot of what they're hearing actually is a very negative dialogue around refugees, and people don't always realized that actually the refugees in this camp, because they're so connected via WhatsApp and Facebook, are listening to all these same conversations that we're having. They'll watch this clip afterwards, you know, and that's,
they'll actually send us a WhatsApp text.
Really?
So
Yeah.
when statements are made, you know, it really affects their feeling accepted by the world and welcomed. You know, how do we? And that's a big goal of this film, is to make sure the world feels world is more welcoming to refugees.
It's kind of crazy. You've got two white guys from the U.S. who are American going to a refugee camp, which is incredibly dangerous. How did you win them over to get them to tell your story?
Well, so before we went, I think, you know, and this was actually a couple years ago, so there was even less coverage, and we were nervous. We were really nervous.
Yeah.
How are we going to be accepted in this camp? Or maybe we wouldn't be. But as soon as we arrived, we were immediately welcomed in by the community. They helped us set up our tent. They immediately brought tea into our tent, and we're the entire time there was no point where I felt in danger.
Yeah.
Really?
Honestly, I mean, the camp feels like a city, really. You know, it's 85,000 people now in the middle of the desert, and you know, you just, people are going about their routine in many ways. It's developed into this multi-million-dollar economy actually inside of the camp. There's 3,500 businesses, and that's not what people would perceive when they think about a refugee camp. And so for us, I mean, our whole approach as filmmakers was not to go in and simulate the life of a refugee, but to have time just to have these conversations, just to sit in our tent and walk around, experience the life and the beat of what this is really like.
And just in our last minute, it seems as though they make life as livable as possible, but do they want to return to Syria? Do they want to be resettled elsewhere in the world? And what is next for you guys?
So this is really a long-term issue, and our friends there recognize that. And while they would love to all go back, they recognize they need to start rebuilding their lives. And this is something that is so important, to support host countries, where 90% of refugees are in Lebanon, Turkey, Iraq, and Jordan. And so we need to invest in these economies so that they can allow refugees to work, so that they can be moved freely, so that they can really restart their lives, and instead of being a burden, be something that's positive and provide energy and creativity to the economy.
Is there anything you would suggest that the U.S. government could do differently to deal with the situation? You live there, you've seen it.
I mean, immediately, and what we really are hoping for this coming week is that this elevates the global conversation around refugees, increases funding to the refugee crisis. As currently, this past year, it was 51% funded to support refugee issues. So a lot of things like education get cut when there's no funding. And then the second is sending that message around being welcoming. I mean, about less than 1.5% of Syrian refugees have been resettled globally to Western countries. And so if that even increases just marginally as a statement towards these refugees that no, we're not scared of you, we welcome you, you can be a part of our societies. Rauf and Ismail and our friends, they're listening, and that goes a really long way.
That's a very important message to end on. Our viewers can know that this is available on Netflix. You're screening this movie around the country, and we wish you the best of luck. It's a topic we think there should be more attention on. Chris Temple and Zach Ingrasci with Salam Neighbor. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks
guys.
for having us.